My name is Ben Nichols, one of our directors on the digital solutions team here at Method. And I'm joined tonight by my good friend Cal. I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll talk a little bit about the topic.
Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Jeff, for having us here today. And I'm Cal Nanji. My last been in the product management, strategy, marketing functions, kind of that intersection of those functions for about 20 years. My last role was Global Chief Product Officer at Honeywell. And looking forward to having a fantastic conversation on customer discovery.
Yeah. As everybody knows, tonight we're really here to talk about and dive a little bit deeper into how customer-centric discovery around our products that we own, we love, that we work with every day, how that can influence business strategy. And I know that Cal, being at Honeywell and other organizations for many years, is very passionate about this. We've all experienced this in different ways. And I really just want to let's just open it up and dive right in and see and understand, like, what are your thoughts? What are some of the tactics and how does this parallel dive in? Because I mean, I know from my experience and my perspective, where we're a little bit unique in the role that I get to play is because I get a chance to talk to many organizations and understand what are their pain points. Where does that product strategy really start to divert from the business strategy itself, and how do we identify those gaps? So I get to see it every day, but I'm curious to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's a pretty common challenge, right? I think many of you probably face it within your organizations. And it's important to kind of take a step back as you move into any initiative or any or a new organization, for example. So as an example, when I got into Honeywell, one of the things I first did is to ensure that I understood strategically that the organization is aligned on what they're going after, right? Is the product strategy aligned with the business strategy? And if not, what are those things we have to do to get all the stakeholders and get consensus from those stakeholders? So what I found is, actually, going through a couple of tactics. Number one, as I mentioned, that strategic alignment organizationally to ensure that you actually have it. Number two is to actually say, once you've got that strategic alignment, how do the customers fit in? What is the strategy to actually get customer insight and have that customer centricity kind of part of that conversation? Finally, is the organization capable to actually get these things done? So when I've applied some of those three lenses to organizations, you can then uncover, where those issues may lie. Number one, you think about this alignment between business strategy and product strategy and customer. Many times you go out into the market, you've got a fantastic solution, you go in front of a customer may or may not have an alignment to what that solution or value proposition offers. For example, you come back to the organization and say, hey, this is not going to fly. And I think we talked about some of this as a inherited strategy, right? And when you've got those kinds of inherited strategies, I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of shift the organization and the executive team to say, hey, based on this data, based on the quantitative and qualitative information that we receive from customers, we probably might have to pivot, maybe based on what our initial strategy was and what the customer actually needs. So I think uncovering those at the front end, ensuring that you've got buy-in from executives as to why are going to be really critical as you make progress around any strategy or new organization or new initiative.
Yeah, it's interesting when we start to peel back some of those layers, because when we were talking about this earlier, we had a chance to catch up when we talk about product and what product management is. It's been changing so much over the past 10, 15, 20 years, where when I say I need a product man, I think I use this analogy. I said, I need a product manager is like me saying I need a software developer. That can mean a lot of different things. So as I look in the room here, I had a chance to catch up with a few of our product owners and product managers ahead of this. The type of products that we own and the type of organization that we sit within is very very different, and we're all at different levels of maturity. And with that maturity comes different levels of access to our users. And we were talking about this as well, where we aren't all enabled, or we don't all have that opportunity to go and sit hand in hand or shoulder to shoulder with our customer. We might do it, maybe a couple times a year,
Yeah,
May,
that's
right?
definitely not enough.
Definitely not enough. And how do we find that right balance? I've, in my career, and I think we talked about this as well. I had an opportunity when I was working at Shutterflies, had a product in the manufacturing world. My customer was outside in the facility. I could go talk to them every day, every hour, whatever I needed. I had that opportunity to go and talk to them and have that influence over not only the product strategy, but as well as the business and the operations strategy as we're seeing things happening live. That is definitely not the rule. That's more the exception. So when you're in that environment, it's a little bit different than when we're sitting in an office, or if we're not sitting with users and we're making a bunch of assumptions, right?
Absolutely.
So that intersection between, hey, our product strategy is going here, but our business strategy is not aligned. Being able to have that I guess that internal look into your organization, both from a product point of view, but also organizationally, is what's our level of maturity as a product team, and then what's our level of maturity with discovery. And I think a lot of the clients and the organizations that I get the opportunity to talk to, they don't necessarily know how to get to that next level of discovery. So what are some of the tactics, I know really with discovery specifically, that you've been able to implement successfully?
Yeah. We talk about this a little bit. First and foremost is, as a product team or as a product management team, you have to actually enable that product manager to go out and visit the customer. And to do that, you actually have to create, make space, right? Make room for during their day to day, and eliminate some of the stuff that they're doing, take it off their plate. One of the tactics we used is identified a lot of low value added tasks that product managers are doing, SKU setup, a lot of operational stuff. We kind of just said, hey, here's a list of things that if we take off the product manager's plate, they will now have, XYZ amount of time to actually go out and do what they need to do with the customer in order for us to transform to be a more customer-centric organization. And many of my product managers, once we did that initiative, or that to take off some of those tasks, they were freed up. They were freed up to go out to the customer. In fact, I initiated something within their goals to actually, in some product management teams, to go out to the customer 40% of the time, to actually be in front of the customer and identify, synthesize information in that customer or that vertical that they're focused on, bring that back to the organization, and really then develop successful solutions around those customer insights.
And that is a big number.
It's a big number.
That is a really big number. I'm sure anybody hearing that is going, 40%. How do I spend 40% of my time with my customer? And there's different ways that product managers can go do that, right? You don't have to physically be there with your customer all the time. Could that be both a physical, a figurative, a digital? Like, what are some of the ways that your teams actually put that into practice, and that you
Yeah.
saw be successful?
Yeah, it's a combination of all the above, right? Obviously, being on site and in person, depending on what the situation is great. But many of those conversations, and with the advent of post COVID, we have so much more opportunity now to be virtual, and that was a portion of those customer visits as well. Also, don't forget about conferences, trade shows, and other events that are just really specific to whatever industries you might be in. Those are really critical to be out there in front of the customer, really get some insights, be able to physically display product, use product with the customer, and get their insights that way as well. One of the things, and as far as tactics go, right, and if you go out with the product team, one of the things I always wanted to also consider is ensure that we've got not just the product team out there, but the engineering team as well, right? So if you've got a counterpart, if you're a product manager in a particular line of business or a particular segment or solution, you've got a counterpart engineering person that is, kind of your, what we call a three-legged stool, along with, somebody in marketing or maybe somebody in operations, to go out to the customer all together and really be able to get a lot of insight from the different lenses that those individuals bring to the table. And that's really critical as well.
And I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. That is one of the biggest things that I've also seen when we go out and we run this assessment around modern product and what those teams mean. There's vision, there's the vision alignment, there's the cross collaboration within the teams, but there's also the delivery element of this. And what I've seen is engineering teams really I don't know when this shift happened or if it's always been present. It's probably all the above, but they really want to know who is the customer and why are we solving this problem for them? Because they don't want to be, I say they, the engineering teams are trying to solve a problem in the right way that might have to have a scalable component to it. Um, but they really want to understand who is the customer because they might solve the problem differently than in years past where the product manager was the gatekeeper, but now it's, hey, let's get them out, let's do a day in the life, understand where are we going from a product strategy, but also it really ties back to the business strategy when you think about engineering teams and their impact on an entire organization. And when you start to spider out into enterprise and other types of models.
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical to have those perspectives. And to have an organization that allows you to come out there. And one of the challenges that we actually saw is, actually getting that customer face time. And ways to do that is obviously, hey, we've got potential co-collaboration opportunities with you. Here's an opportunity for us to collaborate with you as a strategic partner, as a strategic vendor, however you want to kind of position it. An example of that is, we talk about customer problems and customer challenges, and one of the things that we always want to try to do when you visit customers is not just focus on their challenges of today, but also determine and help them focus on their challenges of tomorrow. And one way to do that is to initiate the strategic partnership where you're a co-innovator, co-collaborator with your customer, and really position them as such, right? Not only do you get traction with that customer and you get a more successful launch of the product at the end, but you get the ability to really craft solutions relative to that customer or that vertical that you're in. An example, just from my recent past, and I can't name names, but Honeywell partnered with a major hotel organization to co-collaborate and develop the room of the future. And we brought insights, subject matter experts from Honeywell. We brought subject matter experts from that hotel organization. And it was a 6-month process of actually understanding, customer use cases, personas, identifying all the challenges and pain points that travelers have, and what can we, as two very, expert organizations in this market, craft to ease that customer end user pain point as they travel in hotels. So at the end of that 6-month period, we developed some prototypes and we actually mocked up some rooms. We brought select guests in to actually try them out, and then we got feedback, iterated, and made sure that the end result, which is still kind of in process, will have a successful outcome. So that co-collaboration and taking not only the customer along the journey, but the end user of that customer along that journey is important.
Yeah, no, that I'm sure that's hitting home with a lot of the folks who are here and listening online. One thing that I think stuck out was the example that you were just taking us through was really around, hey, we're going to go do this new thing. What about for the product manager who's inheriting or the product leader who's inheriting? A lot of us through our career will step into new roles, into new organizations with that varying level of maturity, but how do I, as a product manager or a product leader, take that inherited strategy and then be able to actually influence from there? Not just the product strategy, but then tying it back to the business strategy.
It's really critical. And I've been in that position, as many of you have probably been in that position as well, going into an organization or getting a new project and taking a look at it and just maybe even looking at a business case and saying, hey, this doesn't look right. Let me take a step back and really try to understand, the market opportunity that's there. Do we have a customer that actually wants to buy this? Is the value proposition validated? Do we have a go-to market channel? Do we have the resources and the capabilities to actually get this done? Sometimes those things aren't checked off. Sometimes they've not been validated. So as a product manager, you go and you make sure and you assess, take a step back and assess all that. And in terms of just tying into, business strategy and product strategy, one of the things that we employ is identify, as I mentioned before, ensure that you've got some strategic alignment in your organization on where the business needs to go from a revenue, importance perspective on where the, what are those drivers for the organization. Number two, from a product strategy standpoint, as you ensure you go out to your customers and determine what they need, you come back to the organization and you say, okay, based on the insight of X customer, we've got a set of objectives and problems that align with our business and where the business needs to go. So you focus on those, right? And you focus on those areas of opportunity. Then you focus specifically on those customer pain challenges and pain points, develop a value proposition. Again, you do a gap analysis and say, these are the solutions and the value propositions that align with our business strategy, that align with where we want to go as an organization. An example, again, from my past, we had these, macro strategies at Honeywell, and we focused to ensure that all of our solutions were based on improving sustainability for our customer, improving automation for our customer, and improving digitalization for our customer. If it didn't generally align with those three, key strategic levers, we took a step back and really understood, hey, why are we doing this, and what is the impact on the organization?
No, and that's great that you all were also at that level of maturity to be able to have those conversations and make those decisions. I think when I look about around the mix in the room, I'm sure there's folks saying, well, I'm a product leader of one, or I'm a team of three, or I'm a team of 500, or even 5,000 or more in some cases. Given that varying level of size and impact, how can I guess what's the one thing that if I were a product leader, product manager in that situation, like what is my most influential tactic or opportunity around influence that I should be able to rank as my one, two, or three?
Yeah, I mean, as a product manager, I think using the tools that you have, data is critical, right? Ensuring that, hey, if you're going to shift or make a pivot, for example, you have an inherited strategy, you identify that may or may not work for the customer or for the organization. You get back to the executive team and you provide the data, right? You provide the analysis, you provide the qualitative and quantitative summaries of what's going on and what you've found. And you then identify the pivot itself, and actually having maybe criteria around why you shouldn't go after something, major customer dissatisfaction, a smaller market opportunity than once existed, or no technical capability within our organization to actually get it done. Whatever that criteria might be, you have to articulate that message, identify where the problem areas are, and then identify a pivot that would actually work, and get buy-in from the executives. The one thing that I would add to that is all the executive teams want to ensure that you've got not just the pivot and the idea, but also a risk management perspective in place as well, that if it didn't work out, what are you going to do to manage that risk, and ensure that you've got at the end of the initiative or project, that you've got some revenue coming in.
Yeah, and I think that we're naturally progressing into that section of whether we inherited or whether we own this strategy. We've done our diligence. We've asked the hard questions and said, have we actually gone out and seen the customer yet? Depending on the answer, we then have to come in and rebuild that business case as well as that narrative. And I know that this is something that is also a real passion around what is that narrative? How do you tell that story really upwards? And upwards can be at multiple levels. Whether you're a product manager, a product leader, a VP, you still have to have that upward conversation of here's where we're going and why. So I know you've been through this multiple times. So I'd like to hear your thoughts and some of your experiences there.
Yeah, absolutely. And really good question. It's all about creating that narrative and ensuring that you have, the view of the customer, number one, right? And the one way that I've been able to position it, or my teams have been able to position it, is identify, the different types of frameworks that you could use to identify your customer, whether it's a persona or a customer journey. Identify the customer going through the product or the solution, the service, whatever the product might be. Identify those pain points. Identify, where you found the challenges from your customer insight. Identify what the solution might be around it, and then ensure that you have the ability to provide a narrative that says, as an organization, we could actually create a very valid value proposition around this particular problem. Here's the market opportunity that's in front of us, and then do some predictive modeling on, hey, if X number of customers actually purchase a solution, here's what the potential revenue could be. Here's where we could actually go into the market and maybe even go to adjacent markets based on credibility within this space. And that's where you actually get that traction and that buy-in from the executive team on and making some impact on growth and revenue.
Yeah, I think that I think we've all been there to some extent. And I also think that there's a natural ripple and a lead time that we all go to in our brain of I have a product roadmap, I have a tactical delivery roadmap, and now I have this strategic product roadmap that's now going to influence our business. What's been your experience like with that? I'll call it the ripple or the if I were to use now, next, later, how do we look at it from a later point of view?
Yeah.
Or
No, it's
how quick of a pivot have you seen before from leadership?
Yeah. And, so talking about the now, next, later, and prioritizing, if you've got a lot of insights from your customers, right? How do you actually then deploy? What do you do to prioritize that? What are the things that you do as a team to organize those, those insights? What we've done and what's been successful is really identifying those impact areas, right? You can't really boil the ocean, right? Number one, you have finite number of resources, a finite, amount of time to actually get something done. So you focus on the most impactful thing for the business that in its current state, your core business. And we actually use, a horizon planning method, popularized by a big consulting firm I won't name. But that horizon planning method works really well, right? You identify what your core business opportunity is. You focus your efforts, 60% of your efforts on that. You've got Horizon 2, which is that next level of insight that you can put on your roadmap and say, hey, these are the opportunities that we might have in 2 to 5 years that our customer might have these challenges in 2 to 5 years. You put those on the roadmap. And then finally, you've got the, disruptors and innovations that are, 5 to 10 years out. And you identify those and you determine as an organization, what do you need to do from a resource perspective to actually fund those and be ready for those things in the future. I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but I think it really helps them prioritize as an organization, you know, the key impacts and the key areas of growth opportunity that you can actually impact today as opposed to tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's exactly where I think I was trying to not lead you, but get you to a good thought around how do we balance that? Hey, we learned something from our customer. It's very important, but again, depending on the size of your organization, if you have 5,000, it might not have an immediate impact, and that's okay though, right? We're also saying that that's okay because the way that we are going about and sitting with our customer, learning from uh, our customer also only tells us but so much. There's a lot in between the lines that we have to read, both from a qualitative and a quantitative point of view. I'm curious what, in terms of resistance, you've run into as well from leadership when these strategies around discovery have been implemented.
Resistance specifically from the executive team or
Uh,
from the customer?
that's a good question.
Yeah,
Depending on the type of customer we have, there's always a level of resistance to,
there is.
I don't want to meet with you. I don't have time to meet with you. Or, how do we as an organization, when you're talking about the 40%,
Yeah.
there's probably the immediate resistance from a team point of view to say, how are you going to have 40% of your team's time now just going to customers? There's cost impact there. We talked
Yep.
about, sort of supplementing or diverting some of the lower level tasks maybe to other teams, which is an organizational alignment. But I guess that was one of the biggest things when we were talking earlier is like, what's the resistance from leadership when I say, I want my teams to go spend 40% of the time with customers now? What is their immediate reaction to that?
Well, the fortunate part about that is that leadership actually put that directive in place. So
Well,
it
that's
came from
nice.
the top. Yeah.
Does that happen for
So
everybody? Everybody,
um,
yeah, definitely.
so that directive came from the top, and we actually had to figure out how to do it in the most, reasonable, efficient, budget-friendly way, right? Because you're not going to get more money, right? You have to figure out a way to do it. So yeah, I mean, you can use, different tactics that we talked about before, in person, virtual, make use of trade shows. But, if you go to a trade show, just don't go to a trade show, have 15 customer meetings or 20 customer meetings. Do what you can to be in front of the customer as much as you can, and really be, creative in how you actually get it done. Because yeah, we were fortunate enough to have that directive from the top. Many times you don't, but if you don't, I think it's another way to say, when you show the opportunity that can come from really deep customer insight, really then create that business case to say, if we were to develop these solutions based on these insights that we can get, do some predictive analytics. And, the one things that executives love is to see a path to revenue. start showing that path to revenue, start showing that path to growth, or adjacent opportunities, new opportunities based on insights that you can receive. And as you go through that process, there's some low hanging fruit that you can actually have some early wins, for example, and showcase those, and really get some traction around that. Put some points on the board, and have the ability to talk through those, build on those, and then create a much better and more consistent way to grow on that.
And I think it also changes the way, and I'm curious your point of view on this. Uh, when a product manager joins an organization, we have a set of expectations in our head around how we're going to function. When leadership then says, no, for the positive, this is how we're going to operate, what is the product team's reaction to that? Do they have this? Is there an upskilling that's required? Is there a gap? Is there a introvert versus extrovert, or there's a new function that they have to serve, which is pseudo experience research design. Not everybody's comfortable going out and asking questions with customers, but they might not know the right questions to ask. Was there a learning curve there?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were fortunate enough to have a lot of fantastic training opportunities to actually get that in place, right? So we identified areas of opportunity for our individual product managers to say whether or not they had the capability to go out and do some really good VOC or OVOC. How do you do it? What are the things that you can employ to be more successful in your customer visits? So fortunately, we had a lot of good training in place to get that done, and we had for lack of a better method, we did product management 101, 102, 103 sessions where product managers had to go through that, and you get a check in your system that you've done this training, and then you get to the next level of training, 201, 202, 203, for example. And then you really have the ability to then say, as a product manager, you are making progress in developing your skills on these really specific areas of VOC, discovery, OVOC, and whatever the case might be. And if you don't have those trainings in place, there's a lot of opportunities out there just that are available for free, right? That you can task and bring into your organization, and really develop your own curriculum. I think it's important. And, I've worked in small organizations in the past, and I've had to do that as well. Identify the curriculum you need, develop it, and then deploy it, and really get your teams to a level where they're capable to be in front of a customer.
And that's great. We, like I said earlier, we're fortunate enough where I get to see and talk with different levels of executives and teams who are on different paths and different journeys, and some who are at that roadblock of, I just don't know how to do discovery. We've been doing this for 20 years. We have a great product. Our business strategy is changing on the horizon, but we fundamentally just don't know how to do discovery. And all the tactics that you were just talking about were ones that really hit home. You have to be able to train up. You have to look at your team. What are your skills? Where are your gaps? And that's okay. Where do we want to level up our teams? Both from a quantitative, qualitative, in person, how do we make decisions? How do we do roadmaps? I don't know. I always go back to, and it, I'm in a different position, but I always go back to, I want to go put that hard hat on. I want to go pull up the boots, or we were talking about galoshes earlier, different story. I want to be able to go out there in the field. I want to talk to people. That is just one type of discovery. That's the one that you actually get to go in and talk to customers, learn from customers. And we did talk about this idea around the time. There's the 40%, but a lot of the teams here, they don't get that opportunity to go and have that 40%, 50%. It might be 1%. It might be less than 1%. It might be zero, which is, another problem in itself. I guess what I'm getting at is, I'm really curious, trying to tie this all back, because I know we want to save some time here for questions. The most important thing is really around customer-centric discovery, and how that's going to change not just the product. The product is going to continue. And that's where we see this disconnect between our product teams are going out and doing customer-centric discovery in different ways, but we're not tying it back to the business. So the business is going one way, but our products are still going another. At what point do you throw your hands up and say, time out? and I know that you've seen this in a variety of different ways, but I guess for this group here and for those watching online, what would you say are the top three takeaways for that to be successful? And what corners could our product teams or our product leads start to look around? Look around corners that you don't know to look around is hard. So, what are some of the things that you would leave this group with?
Yeah. Number one, make time to be out there, right? Data is critical. Synthesizing that data, creating a narrative around that data, storytelling is critical as well when you try to get some buy-in from an executive team. Really tying in that story to where the business is going as an organization, right? What are those goals that the business has? If it's sustainability, hey, if it's automation, tie in your data and what you receive from the customer around those areas of those strategic levers that the organization has to really tell that story as you drive home the point that you want to try to achieve, right? So it's critical to have the data points. Number one. Number two, have the customer. One of the things that I've thought was successful is actually have the customer come to you and create a workshop, right? With your own executives within that workshop, you identify a problem. Said hotel company wants to create a hotel room in the future. These are the things that we can do as an organization to help them. They're coming to visit us. You know, invite several executives or several stakeholders to that conversation and actually have open conversation on how you can assist the customer to achieve what they need to do. You get that initial buy-in, right? You get that initial alignment strategically. You tie all that into where the organization wants to go. And then number three, finally, I think we talked a little bit about it, but building up talent and capability within the organization to actually get and achieve that. Many ways to do that. I think for me, the best way to do it is on the job, right? You can have curriculum, you can have other things, but I think on the job training, um, um, deploying a senior product manager with a junior product manager, for example, getting insights, having them learn on how to get insights from a customer and how to actually go out and do really good VOC, to do really good design thinking, for example, getting that level of upskilling is critical. I think those are the top three that I would
No,
suggest.
yeah, that's great. Those are wonderful takeaways, and it also prompts another, thought when I'm thinking about this concept and this idea of going out and sitting with customers. If we think about our customer, we might have external customers, we might have internal customers, we might be serving internal teams with the systems and the products that we own. So going out and sitting with them also builds that trust, that relationship, and that the understanding from both parts of the organization that this team really understands what I do. So when you get to the point of actually deploying or doing user testing or pulling in champions for change, when you start going through those change management and product adoption levers, you're going to have theoretically more buy-in because you've already sat with your customer. And this could be across multiple industries, but when you think about your internal customers, when they're going to have to adopt this software, the worst thing that I've seen is teams leave, and this happens, right? Teams leave on Friday, they come back on Monday, and their way of working has changed, and they don't know why, because nobody actually went out and sat with them to understand, how do you do your job today? I'm not going to tell you how to do your job tomorrow, but how can we understand it, and how can we optimize and make your job better, simpler, faster, more automated to enable you to do other things that are more important for the business? So